We've been following with great concern the recent headlines about attacks on Christian churches and mob violence against Christians in Pakistan. Regrettably, these recent headlines, as bad as they are, only begin to scratch the surface of the full extent of Christian persecution in Pakistan. Joining us today to discuss the matter is Shaheryar Gill. Shaheryar serves as senior counsel at the American Center for Law and Justice, ACLJ, and oversees the ACLJ's Virginia Beach office, where he leads the international legal team. He also oversees the European Center for Law and Justice affiliate office in Pakistan, which provides legal assistance to persecuted Christians in Pakistan. He also serves as adjunct faculty at Regent University School of Law in Virginia Beach. Shaheryar, welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
So Shaheryar, the first person I really thought of when we were following the headlines about these recent attacks in Pakistan was you. I know of your work. I follow your work down at Regent University and ACLJ and ECLJ. But before we discuss the recent events, I'd like to hear from you a little bit of context, if you could set the table for us on the history of the Christian community in Pakistan, who they are, what their background is.
Right. Rich, Christian community in Pakistan has always been there. It's interesting history. It starts from the Indus Valley civilization, about 4,000 plus years. And most of the Christians in Pakistan and in India and Bangladesh, entire subcontinent, are actually the indigenous people of that civilization. At the arrival of the British and American missionaries in the subcontinent in the 1800s, during the British Raj, a lot of Christians or local Hindus from the lower castes, they converted to Christianity. And now we have about 2% of the total population of Pakistan are Christian, which is the total population is about 230 million, and it's so 2.5 or 2% are Christian.
Well, thank you for that. Very interesting to learn that the Christian community in Pakistan is indeed almost as old as Christianity itself. Certainly, the Indian, I'm familiar with the Indian Christian community that was founded by Thomas the Apostle, and it's very fascinating to learn that Pakistan also kind of goes back nearly to that time in history. When most people think of Pakistani Christians, they think of recent converts who are suffering persecution as so-called apostates. Although I understand Pakistan doesn't have apostasy laws, I'm sure society would look at them as such. Well, thank you for that background. I understand also that the Christian community in Pakistan has suffered a long history of persecution for their faith. So they certainly are witnesses on the ground. Can you give us an idea what that looks like historically, as even running up until today?
Right. So, Rich, historically, the persecution has been always there with the arrival of outsiders from Iran, mostly, who entered the subcontinent and started to convert people, and they treated the local Dravidians as the lower human beings, and who could only serve as people who would just simply serve you as servants, as slaves. So the history really starts from there, history of the persecution. But the recent persecution has been with because a lot of people from the lower castes converted to Christianity, so the persecution never stopped in one sense. So now we have persecution in Pakistan, especially under the blasphemy laws, which started in the Pakistani government enacted those laws in the 1980s after the Afghan war, and the country was Islamizing at that time, and the legislature then put in place several sections of the blasphemy laws in the penal code. And one of the notorious sections, which almost now the international community knows, is about blaspheming or uttering words about the Prophet Muhammad. And it carries the mandatory death penalty. Originally, the section was, it contained life imprisonment and death penalty. But in 1991, a federal court, federal Sharia court in Pakistan ruled that there was only one punishment for such a crime, and that's death. And that since then, the legislature never acted on it, and that decision became the law. So now we have a mandatory death penalty. Another section on desecration of the Quran carries life imprisonment. And there are other sections that applies to Ahmadis, which is also a splinter group of Islam, and a minority in Pakistan. Hindus, Christians, even Muslims are charged under the blasphemy laws.
So the follow-up question to that, I suppose, would be, if one is charged for such a with such a charge, blasphemy, is there really an objective legal process that anybody can really rely on getting a fair shake, or is it almost like a de facto guilty verdict upon being charged?
Rich, at the initial level at trial, most of the time you can assume that it's going to be a de facto punishment. Uh, so, and there are various aspects of that surround that. Most of it is the mob pressure on the courts. People show up at the courts from different groups, people who accuse others falsely of blasphemy. So they show up, they threaten judges, they threaten the officials, and even the recent attacks. You can see how it unfolded. So there's a lot of mob pressure on the courts. So you can always assume that the lower courts are going to convict a person who is falsely accused of blasphemy. And most of the cases, even the courts have noted in Pakistan, the Lahore High Court, in an opinion, noted that most of the cases are in fact false, and people bring those charges to settle their own personal scores. If somebody wants another person's land, they would go and file a blasphemy case against that person. So the person who is accused of blasphemy, his life is now basically in prison. His family has to run away, and you can simply occupy his property.
And even if a charge is never brought for whatever reason, I'm sure extrajudicial justice, we'll call it, mob violence, as you say, lynchings and so forth, are prevalent, highly prevalent. What's the role of that in not only Christian persecution, but also persuading and influencing the legal system from bringing charges to avoid such violence?
Right. That's an interesting aspect of the blasphemy laws. So I always say that over 30 years of a law in place and people practicing it and abusing it, it has taught the country that the only punishment for blasphemy against Islam is death. And now, these days, or actually it has happened many times, that people don't even wait for the courts to act or the police to act, and they go and they want to carry out the punishment with their own hands. So that's where you see mob violence come in, and people have even kidnapped or grabbed people from police custody and taken and just killed them, murdered them in broad daylight. And those are horrible instances. Just a few years ago, there was a Bangladeshi citizen, and he was brutalized. He was brutally killed on the streets, and he was simply he had a dispute with some workers at his factory, and they thought that the only way of getting rid of him was to really kill him. So he was killed. There have been a judge in I think about 25 years ago, a judge was killed in his chambers after he acquitted a blasphemy accused. There have been a number of mob attacks in Pakistan. In 2009, a famous attack in Gujarat city resulted in about almost, I think, eight deaths, and the mob burned down hundreds of homes that belong to Christians. So it's been a real issue. And a lot of that plays out in the judicial system as well. So the police, sometimes they even have to arrest the person who is accused of blasphemy in order to protect him from the violence.
Wow.
So that's it's very interesting, or I mean, it's unfortunate that the police have to do that. But sometimes they have, in fact, arrested people just to protect them from mob and then put them in prison. And then the person's life is basically in prison until the courts, case goes through the legal system, from the trial court to the high court to the Supreme Court. And you might know about the famous case of Asia Bibi. She spent about 9 years in prison, fighting up to the Supreme Court, and eventually the Supreme Court acquitted her.
Interesting. So we've discussed blasphemy laws in Pakistan. Zooming out just a little bit, what is the role of Sharia law in the Pakistani legal system? What role does it play, and is it one that's just more about social influence, or is it something that's actually memorialized in the Pakistani body of law or constitution? How does that fit in?
So originally the Pakistani law and also Indian law, which when it was one country, it was written. Most of the law was written by the British. So the legal system is very much like we have in the U.S. or in U.K. It's based on common law system. But after Pakistan came into being in 1947, it started a process of incorporating Sharia law in the local, in the constitution and then the penal code. And so there are some aspects of Sharia law. For example, blasphemy law is part of that. Now, the way it works is regular courts try those cases, and the appellate court, which is for generally for all cases, hears those cases. But then we have different aspects of Sharia law incorporated. Now, we don't have apostasy law. Sometimes blasphemy law is used against any apostates that would have converted from Islam to Christianity or another religion. So there are several aspects of Sharia law, and the Constitution basically declares that all laws have to be consistent with Sharia.
I see. I see. Well, thank you for that. Now, I want to fast forward to the current events, the headlines we've been reading about in the news. My reading over open source mainstream news has suggested to me that it's basically a pretext that's used, or rather, the events that took place in Sweden, desecration of the Quran and so forth, being used as a pretext by such angry mobs, almost looking for a reason to attack such churches and Christian communities. How did that play out? How did it begin, and how has it played out? In society in Pakistan, among particularly Christian society.
Rich, I agree. I think the pretext issue cannot be ruled out here, because what happened, and I'll go into some of the details about how it unfolded. The pretext cannot be ruled out because there was no evidence against the people who have been accused of blasphemy. So what happened was somebody accused two Christian brothers in Jaranwala, Faisalabad. It's about two and a half hour drive from Lahore, where I grew up actually. And so people found some papers of presumably torn pages of the Quran, and there were some writings with red pen on those papers, and there was a picture of this Christian man on the papers. And one would wonder, why would somebody do that and put his own picture on it? That's nobody asks those questions. So a news breaks out, and on the morning of this August 16, just a day after all the Christians celebrated the Independence Day of Pakistan on August 14. So this news breaks out. There was an announcement in a mosque, and these videos are readily available on social media. This person is announcing that these Christians have blasphemed, they have desecrated the Quran, and what are you Muslims doing? And you are eating breakfast in your home, and well, you need to come out on the road and protest about it. So a mob gathers because of that announcement that a Christian has blasphemed. So, and then another video shows this presumably who appeared to be an imam. He is instigating the mob, and the mob is chanting slogans, and they disperse and they go to this Christian community and attack. Now, while all those announcements were going on, the Christian community heard about it and people just fled. They left their belongings, they left everything, and they just fled with their children to protect their lives. So the mob attacks, and they attacked over 20 churches. And there are videos just of violence and vandalism are available all over the internet. So they attacked the churches, destroyed crosses, destroyed the Bibles, and then burned the churches down. Then they also attacked Christian homes. And usually in Pakistan, you'll find these small communities of Christians, here and there. So a lot of times Christians live in one area. You'll find several homes of Christians. So about 80 homes were attacked and burned down in this incident, and just because this paper was handed over to the police. And you'll see that there's another video. Interestingly, this police officer is trying to calm down the mob. He's saying that we will arrest these people, we will bring them to justice, the court will punish. As soon as he said the court will punish them, people said, no, we will punish them, we will punish them. So you see that even the police officers are standing there, and they can't really control the mob. I think they have the ability and the power to do that, but in that incident, all these police officers were just helpless, and they just stood by to and watch this mob violence. Now, fast forward a couple of days, within the last 2-3 days, the police have arrested over 100 people who attacked the Christian community. A lot of government officials have gone to that area and given statements and even apologized. There's one imam who often works with the government. He's very famous for really speaking out against such violence. So he did a press conference with Christian leaders, and he apologized to the Christian community on behalf of the country. So there has been some efforts made. How it will affect, what will be the result? Would these people be brought to justice? We have yet to see that. In the past, that has not happened. There have been many attacks in the past. The one I mentioned in Gojra in 2009, and in most of these attacks, people have not been punished. Initially, they arrest people, and then usually some compromises happen, some negotiations happen, and then basically things just sort of quiet down. So I hope that the Pakistani government this time, they will see that this will only stop if they bring the people to justice. So I hope that that's what they do.
Well, of my curiosity is, of the recent 100 or so arrests that were made, what were they arrested for? Were they arrested for just garden variety violence and being, mischievous youth, things of that sort? Or was it for hate crimes, anti-Christian violence? What were the charges?
Right. So the charges basically involve first desecration of the church, of the religious text, Christian religious text, because one of the sections of the Pakistan Penal Code also relates to basically all religions. So any desecration of any religious place is also a crime, which carries, I think it's about 3 years punishment. But then the desecration of the Bible would also include in those charges. Then the charges have been brought under the Anti-Terrorism Act. So the charges are severe. So I believe that those charges are appropriate: vandalism, destruction of property, terrorism. So those charges are appropriate. And if the justice system works the way it should, I believe that these people who have been arrested will be, again, if the government fulfills its promise to punish them, I think they should be appropriately punished under those charges.
Well, it's interesting what you just said, that there are indeed laws that protect churches and the Bible and so forth. Just for my own clarification, these do not fall under the blasphemy laws. In other words, the blasphemy laws only cover blasphemy against Islam, against the Prophet of Islam. or do these church rather laws that protect churches also come under that same family of law?
So there is one section of the penal code that basically was there before Pakistan came into being. It relates to all religions. So disturbing any religious place and desecrating any religious place is a punishable crime. Now, most of the time, this law also has been used only to protect Islamic places because Christians don't go out and file charges of those kind of destructions. Uh, Now, there's a specific law about only the Quran, and it doesn't relate to any other religious text. And that's Section 295B of the Pakistan Penal Code. And it talks about the willful desecration of the Quran, carrying mandatory life imprisonment. Then Section 295C talks about only protecting the sanctity or the blasphemy against the Prophet Muhammad. And that doesn't relate to any other prophet. There's another section that relates to all the Islamic prophets. And now you see, Jesus is one of the Islamic prophets. So therefore, in that sense, Christianity would be protected not protected, but it's still a blasphemy law. And Christians don't go out and file charges if somebody says something about Jesus or the Bible,
No.
which happens all the time. And there are no cases against anybody that I know of that have brought people to courts or the judicial system for talking about Jesus. So the law exists, but that's very particular or limited in punishment. But the biggest laws that the laws that carry biggest punishments are desecration of the Quran and talking bad about the Prophet Muhammad.
Well, that's very interesting. I appreciate that distinction. So the next question would have to be, what's the way ahead? I mean, here at In Defense of Christians, we work with Congress, we work in the White House and the Executive Branch State Department on matters such as foreign aid, sanctions. I mean, these are some of the more powerful instruments of foreign policy that we have at our disposal. But from your side of things, from the ECLJ, the ACLJ, the legal work that you do, the work that you do on the ground, what's the way ahead?
So, Rich, I thank you for asking that question, because I think that's really where we need to work the most. Is at the ACLJ we about 13 years ago we started an office in Pakistan where I grew up, and I was raised in Pakistan most of my life, and so I had the desire because God provided me an opportunity to receive legal education. I had this desire of helping my country. So we started this office in Lahore, and we have done about over 120 cases in the last 13 years, and a lot of them have been successful. So I think the way ahead is really to focus on helping Christians who are persecuted. Of course, first, prayer, lots of prayer for our brothers and sisters there. Second, fighting back on these issues is very important. So what we have done, we have dealt with, represent people in blasphemy cases, in rape cases, in murder cases, in these kind of vandalism cases. So we've had successful results. As long as you stand your ground and fight, and the justice system does work a lot of times, but you have to be persistent. You have to have the presence there. You have to fight. You have to provide adequate legal representation. So what we have done is, just as an example, we are representing two individuals in different blasphemy cases. And one was a 16-year-old teenager when he was arrested in 2017. And we have been pursuing or working on that case for the last 5 years. And he was last year sentenced to death, and there was no evidence against him. The charge was that he had said to a Muslim co-worker that his father's friend blasphemes. Now, as lawyers, we know that's no crime. Telling somebody that somebody else committed a crime is not a crime. But this person was arrested because this Muslim co-worker got offended by him. He filed charges, and Shazad Masih, the 16-year-old kid, went to prison. We represented him at the trial, but the mob again was present. The people who from that group, from an Islamic religious group, were behind the case. They showed up at the court at every hearing. There was a lot of pressure on the judge. So it shouldn't happen, but that's what happened. The judge pronounced him guilty and sentenced him to death. So we have filed his appeal, and that's coming up soon at the High Court. Another case, we're working on another case where two brothers were accused of blasphemy, like what has happened here. No evidence against them. The evidence is basically there was a website that they were accused of creating, but the police has no evidence of them creating the website. They approached the domain, and the domain administration, they came back and they told them nothing, that who created the website. So there's no evidence, but they were accused of creating the website. So we're representing them. We have other clients where people have been killed because a small dispute with a Muslim. So there's the legal aspect of which we are involved in heavily in Pakistan. So the other aspect is education, I think. Educating people on their legal rights, on their their origins, their what they can do when these things happen is very important. And we have done some of work in that area as well at the ACLJ. So I think the other aspect, which really depends on the Pakistani government, is to really see what they want to do. And I believe many officials in the Pakistani government, they do want to do the right thing, and they do want to punish. So I really hope that they do their job, they stand on their word, and this time really punish these people. And I think if they do punish perpetrators like this, there will be a precedent set that, okay, if you do these type of things, you will be punished. I mean, after all, we stand up for, Pakistan has stood up for desecration of the Quran. Well, they can equally stand up for desecration of the Bible. Or somebody takes the law in their own hands and kills a Christian over a false accusation. So I think those are equally important issues for the government to address, so that there's some peace and tolerance about these issues, but also some fear that people will be brought to justice.
Well, thank you for that. And I have to say, really, I truly respect and appreciate the work that ACLJ does, and that's both here at home and abroad. You and your team are really doing the Lord's work, so we certainly appreciate that. Thanks for joining me today to demystify this issue that is, I think, in the minds of many who follow the issues concerning suffering Christians around the world. So we'll continue to pray. We'll continue to work. And I wish you the very best in your mission. And thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.